to order.
Well, one man with a bucket, and that's the village.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Does everybody have their mic on? Okay.
Yep, you're on.
All right, public notification's been distributed. We have the minutes from March 6th to approve. Are there any comments or
Move that we
questions?
approve the minutes?
Second?
Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No? Passes unanimously. Okay. Anybody want to add anything to the agenda? I guess I have approval of agenda item. Hearing none, we'll move forward. Do we have any citizen comments at all on anything that's not on the agenda?
Wow.
Okay.
Is it online
Welcome.
too, maybe? People online, I mean, are there people?
There's no,
No one?
all right. We have one action item involving text amendment changes, recommendation. So let's get started with that.
Well, good evening, members of the Planning Commission. I just wanted to give an overview of this project, and I think Mark is going to do a lot of the heavy lifting on the details of these proposed amendments. But there are three different sections that are being amended, but they come as one package. And this basically addresses a type of development that we're seeing, I would say, in large lot, conservation-minded subdivisions. And, so that, when you look at the
Excuse me.
Oh.
We're trying to have the meeting here, sir. Do you,
I just want to make a public comment, but they told me public comments are over, it's only 5 o'clock.
it's 6:03.
6:03.
Or 6 o'clock, I'm saying, it's just a couple of minutes late.
Do you want to give him an opportunity to speak?
I mean, that's your prerogative as
All right.
chairman.
We'll give you an opportunity to speak. You have a subject that's not on the agenda that you wanted to address?
I think it's part of the agenda, but I'm not sure. But it is.
That's the topic, sir?
Burning,
Burning?
the burning laws that are.
All right, okay. Step up to the podium and give us your, all right, sir. Please tell us your name, your address,
My name is Frank Cerulli. I'm in Shell Point.
okay?
My question is the yard burning laws that basically don't exist. I mean, my father, I was a college professor. My father was a zoning enforcement officer as well as a fire chief, and these laws literally go back to the 60s. You weren't allowed to burn in your yard. In the 40s and 50s, I believe you had to have a standardized container. So the current laws are almost a century behind here. And when I talk to, whenever I talk to someone, a fire person, they're very disappointed that that these laws have not been, updated. And recently, by the way, I called about burning in woods next to a development, and the police said the fire department has to determine whether it's legal, and the fire department said they had no authority in the development, so I had to call DHEC. DHEC did say it was illegal, so they're doing something about it. But South Carolina is one of the worst states for uncontrolled fires. And, there's other things like filling in the land development. That's one of the things I think on your agenda. The filling is really not really monitored for 10 feet. I mean, again, people have built something, they built some dirt in, and that's it, and they just build. And there's really no laws against that, even though we're only 10 feet. I'll give you an example, if you like. In New Jersey, where I'm from, there's something called the Great Swamp. It's 5 square miles, rather. It's within the New York metropolitan area, and it's 200 feet above sea level, but it hasn't been built on since 1964, and it's within, again, it's between two of the wealthiest counties in the United States, and within New York, they could make a fortune, but they don't, because, again, they're being, they're being responsible, basically. And there's other things I've seen. I mean, just the loud mufflers down here, the no yearly inspection of cars, no helmets for motorcycle drivers. Again, stuff like this. I can't believe it when I see it. But my main goal was and again, the firemen agree with me on this, why these yard burning is still allowed.
Well, we can't answer your question tonight, but your comments will be noted as part of our video that goes forward and will be a matter of record. So it's, those who can appropriately address your questions will at that time.
So do I contact someone? Or?
Is there a contact person that he could go to? Fire marshal or someone of the? Well, if we're not sure, we'll find out, and we've got your name, and would you believe your contact information here?
I will.
And we'll find out a name that you can move forward on your.
Okay, yeah, like I said,
Sure.
I'm just concerned about why these
Okay.
laws are literally a century behind. I just don't understand.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate
you.
your comments.
It's unincorporated, has different rules than incorporated areas and stuff, so. Yeah,
Thank you, Alice.
yes, sir.
Mr. Merchant, you're back up.
Okay, well, what you had before you are a series of three amendments to three different sections of the code that address a similar type of issue. And as I was stating earlier, this deals with a very specific type of residential development that we see in large lot conservation subdivisions. And the idea is breaking up the mass of a building. So you have, rather than a principal dwelling, which is one structure, you may have that broken up into several different structures connected by breezeways or covered walkways. So this ordinance is addressing an issue where it helps facilitate that. In addition, several years ago in 2019, staff initiated an amendment and we brought to the Planning Commission that we originally had in the ordinance a provision for guest house and then also a provision for accessory dwelling unit. At that time, staff had concerns about a growing number of short-term rentals, and so we decided to bring forward what we felt was closing a loophole in only allowing one accessory dwelling unit per property. What we realized that there was some adverse impact on that in many of these similar kind of large lot conservation communities, you have, people were building guest houses as part of that development. And so we looked into the issue, and what we're bringing forward is an opportunity for somebody who has a certain minimum acreage threshold to be able to introduce a second accessory dwelling unit. The third item, addressing that concern about short-term rentals, is tightening up language that would only allow one short-term rental per property, so that one of the concerns we had as staff was if you open up additional guest houses, then somebody could maybe even up front look at a way to kind of develop, principal dwelling, several guest houses, and then have them all rented out. And so we're trying to address unintended consequences. I'm going to let Mark Davis go into the details of the proposed amendments, but I wanted to be able to provide that framework. It's kind of an unusual set of amendments, but it is addressing a very real issue for certain developments in this county. And so that's why staff is initiating this and bringing it forward.
All right, thank you.
Answers my question.
So to just kind of continue off of what Rob was saying is that while there's three different sections here, they're all kind of synergistically working together in order to achieve a certain goal. So while they're similar sections and they're similar things we're going to discuss, and we can take them in any order that you all might like, they all work together. So I just want to make sure that everybody kind of understands that.
piece them together, you could ask questions and things like that. But you want to, I kind of in a standpoint, being that there are some oddities to this and there's some complications, I think it's best maybe if I allow you guys to kind of drive on this and maybe start with some questions and we can just go through the language, we can go through the text. Versus me, just you all listen to me trying to explain this for 10 minutes. We can pull up some pictures, we can talk about the text, and we can just jump right into it if you like.
Well, why don't you jump right into it? We'll just, if you just follow the order you've got there. I'm assuming you want us to take a singular vote on the
That's
three
one vote on the
pieces,
whole thing.
because they're integrated.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is that
Um,
okay? Anybody?
I'm good.
Okay. Did you have a question?
I did. Are we open for questions on this, or do we need a motion in
No,
order to?
no.
Well-
Well, we've decided we're going to let Mark proceed with his 10-minute presentation
Oh,
on
I'm
the
sorry.
I'll try to
on the
keep.
details and give us a good understanding. Then we'll see how confused we are and we'll ask questions, if we're confused at all.
I just have one comment, not a question. As you go through it, if you could sort of say, how did this get on your radar screen in the first place? Why you feel it needs to be addressed? And if it's left in place, what's the disadvantage of that? And what's the advantages of going forward? If you get my
I can,
drift.
yeah, and through your questions, I'll try my best. I think Rob's opening was to try to open that up to understand a little bit about the history. So I'll just kind of go back. So the county used to allow a guest house, and it removed that allowance. And this was kind of in regards to its concern with when short-term rentals were starting to heat up and renting short-term rentals there. So that's really one of the main foundation points to this. But in addition to it, while looking at it, regarding the architecture of structures and some of the ways certain things build, and we'll pull up some pictures, show you some examples. This ability to allow the massing of one large structure of a house kind of get broken up and be connected with roofline connections has always been something that we as jurisdictions all throughout counties have always dealt with. So what we've done here, and we can talk about that first, or we can talk about that last, because that's probably one of the more complicated ones. That helps provide what we call codifying the situation to give staff a very clear direction on how to administer these types of homes or architecture, or when something works or when something doesn't work. So that's essentially the goal here, is to provide clear direction for staff on an everyday basis on very complicated things that we have to administer. And then that the zoning department has people constantly coming in that door asking questions, builders trying to build stuff, architects trying to design stuff. And we don't really have the best clear guiding language on some of these matters. This is going to provide that.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
I think Glenn's question went to a further point of what would happen if we didn't do this? What is the downside of not doing this?
It might get focused in certain parts of the county only, instead of it being something that can be offered countywide. That will start there. That will be a downside. That'll be more complicated to do it that way. It'd be viewed as not as equitably shared throughout the county if we don't do it countywide. We don't provide that clarification that I just described. We will still be dealing with these issues coming in our door, moving forward without this clarification. We won't provide an opportunity for larger lots to have what would be considered just, an additional opportunity to use land, their land, by allowing an additional accessory dwelling unit. And we wouldn't clarify that only one of these units could be used as a short-term rental. Right now, all the units can be used as we would currently look at as a short-term rental. So we'd be helping getting that achieved as well.
Okay,
Good, thank you.
thank you.
All right, so let's just go ahead and start. We'll just run through it, and then, so we'll start with that language. Now, somebody who doesn't work in this business, don't even try to read and interpret it. That's all I'm going to say. We as staff even struggled on how to best word this and get it right, while trying to achieve the results. And what we typically do is you kind of write, and then, what's the first thing and what you do when you come up with a scientific theory? You try to disprove it, right? So We would write, we'd come up with something, and then we'd figure out, all right, let's see if we can disprove it, let's see how somebody could use it, let's see how somebody could take advantage of it. So we constantly went through back and forth trying to do that. Ultimately, we ended up at this language here. And I'll try to just kind of simplify it into what it means. Pull up the pictures now. So what this is achieving, say a picture.
Sure, it came up, but I didn't want it to,
Oh, that's fine. Okay, so to start, let's look at what we would consider as an example of an unenclosed roof line connection. Okay, so let's put a visual on that. So what this is this basically connects. Let's say you had a house here, and then you had another structure here that's still part of the primary structure, like a master wing. That they could run one of these, which is a roof line connection, that connects to it, and it's still considered part of the primary structure, and it would be subject to all the primary standards, primary setbacks, primary house placements, and all that kind of stuff. It provides flexibility for architects, and it provides flexibility on how you can construct around in the land. Sometimes a lot of landscape architects and architects used to do this. It helps kind of preserve some environmental features on lots. You can work around trees a little bit more. When you have large structures, those require going in, clearing the whole area, creating a foundation pad, and can be a little bit more destructive. When you give the ability to kind of break structures up, you can be a little bit more sensitive into the land. That's the same reason a lot of our form code pushes back against very large apartment buildings. You say you can do multifamily, just make them a little bit smaller. It's the same idea.
So are you saying that, not the primary structure, but the one that's attached currently is not subject to primary setbacks and all that other stuff?
Well, things are permitted as either primary or accessory.
Okay.
So like accessory structures and primary structures. So typically, yes, primary structures have one set of rules and setbacks,
Right.
whereas accessory structures have a whole nother set of
That's
rules.
currently how our.
Right, so
code
that's how we would be looking at these things. So if you give a little bit of flexibility by providing people to work around that, but at the same time, they have to kind of center it more on their land, have bigger setbacks, and get it off the sides and rears a little bit more than a
Okay.
typical accessory structure might be able to get permitted in place on the property.
I just happen to have a house that just exactly like this.
Okay?
Live in a floodplain, and for purposes of insurance, between the flood insurance, I thought both structures would be considered together, I guess. And they said, oh, no. You need to have a flood elevation for the primary house and the accessory structure in order to get flood insurance. I don't know how that plays into this whole thing, but,
That's flood insurance and how
I know.
who sells that. Let's not get into insurance at this meeting.
okay, just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, so,
Can I
yeah.
ask you about one other example? Because I live next to a person who just turned their garage into an apartment, a habitable apartment. They have a covered walkway. Would they fall now under the guidance of
Okay,
the?
well, let's go back to the language. So let's see exactly what the language says.
Mhm.
So every situation is different.
Gotcha.
There's no one situation. So in order to be considered a part of the primary structure, you have to meet all of the requirements as identified in this language. It has to be finished and heatable spaces. And it doesn't allow garages, because sometimes you have garages and spaces above the garages. So it might be a garage without a space or a garage with a space. So it might be not a garage and just fully, a full, finished space. So that's what that kind of leads at. That are connected to the primary structure with a roof line walkway that meets building code. So all this has to meet building code. It's kind of back to what that kind of image was. Shall be considered part of the primary structure. So that's when, that kind of sets it up. The next sentence then goes into what I was saying is that if you do this, then you are now part of the primary structure and you are subject to all the primary structure development standards. Typically, that's going to be your setbacks and your placements of your structures. That's kind of what the middle of that says, just to clarify that. And then it kind of closes out with what these requirements are and how far you can take it. The walkway connection shall have a width of greater than 2 or 4 feet. So you can't just be like people running a foot. It's got to be usable, wide space that you can walk through and has a roof line like the image that we saw. Might not be as fancy with the rafters, but it's usable. It can be open or enclosed. That happened to be an example of an open one, or you can enclose it. And in no instance shall the roof height exceed a combined length of 30 linear feet. So we'll get into that in a second. In addition to all of these things, what's important to understand is that when people are doing this in the so if we go back to the middle, is that it's subject to primary structure setbacks and other building placement standards and shall match a primary structure, architectural design, and material. So it's not like this is some building and then you're just grabbing something in. It's a holistic looking type of thing. All we're doing is providing flexibility, providing architects and landscape architects a little bit of movement on how they can place structures on land. And so what Rob said, typically those are used more on larger space, larger lots where you have room to spread out. You know, they're not doing this in small lot developments. You don't have the space. This is on larger lot, usually conservation-driven like type developments or rural character areas. Somebody who's trying to develop a 10, 12,000 square foot lot, they're not going to break their massing out. They're barely meeting their primaries anyway. They're always pushing the envelopes on that. So we would expect it to be on more larger space, larger areas that have the room to work. So in addition to, you know, going into the 30 linear feet, so what that is that, so it's got to be 4 feet and no distance can it be longer than 30 feet. So can we go to image 2? Okay, so in this situation, here's a perfect example of the home. And if you look on the primary massing of the main home, you see 2 wings. And then between those, you see like little kind of corridors. Those would be like a connection. On this situation, it looks like one of them is a garage and one of them just looks like another bedroom or suite. The joke I say is where we've been making is this where everybody sends the in-laws or their kids. Let's get them out of the house, right? That's where they're sending them over there. But in that situation, what it would be is, so there's 2 of them there. And this is important, where you have 2 wings and there's 2 of them. So when we say a combined length of 30 feet, you could have one house with one 30-foot run in a space, but they used up their entire 30 feet on that one run. Because we're still trying to keep it within an area. Or they could do it something like that, where you have one primary and you have 2 runs. Let's just say those are both 15 feet. They're both 15 feet, they don't exceed 30. Or they could have 3, where they're 3 10s. The point is it's keeping them together, but it's allowing them to break up the massing to not combine the walls. And you can kind of see what they're able to kind of got off the walls, got some tree saves there, they're kind of helping use with the natural environment. And really, you know, they have a by right to kind of do a house, and that just kind of created a little bit more flexibility on how to best use that land and that lot to maximize some of the views. So that's what this is trying to achieve. It's trying to provide some flexibility, but it's trying to put some guardrails on it with the length of the 30 feet, requiring the minimum width, requiring all the structures to match architecture and design and material, and that it has to meet all the building code requirements, and there's, you know, that's kind of it. So that would be an example of something right there.
So let's say the property is larger this direction, and the guy's got a kid who wants to play drums, and he wants that accessory frog room, whatever you want to call it, a little further away from the house, and wants to go further than 30 feet.
You can still do that, but then you're going to be permitted as an accessory structure now.
Okay, I get it.
So this is just the difference between it being what we call a primary and an
I got it.
accessory.
Okay,
We're establishing rules of when you're still can be considered a part of that primary.
okay, got it.
So if you look at the last sentence on that language, it provides direction to that. If the connections and structures do not meet these requirements, it shall be permitted as an accessory structure and subject to all accessory structure standards.
Okay. And so
Still
you
there.
You covered everything there. Okay, I got it.
Yeah, and is this on? Okay. Yeah, I wanted to add that in our code, we limit the number or the square footage of accessory structures. So if you have a 2,000 square foot house, you're limited to, you know, the amount of additional building space you could have for a shed or other accessory structures. And that's why this becomes an advantage. If you're able to, you know, have a separate structure connected by a breezeway, that's counting towards your overall square footage for your principal dwelling. You know, so that would be the advantage of doing it this way rather than,
Okay.
you know, having something set off in a distance.
Yeah, so
I see that now.
but with limitations. You can't just do this and run something 100 feet and be like, it's part of the primary. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
That's not happening.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, we're still trying to provide flexibility to what Rob said is, that's how those things are. Primaries to accessory structures are always a relationship to size and percent. So somebody might say, hey, I'm gonna do this, I can beef up my primary. Square footage gives me a little bit more room on my 5 acres to have some more room for my percent allowable for accessory structures and go do something further on the lot and get permitted as an accessory structure.
Okay.
So that's kind of what this section of the code is trying to achieve.
Okay.
Okay? And we can just move on to the next one, and then we can do kind of questions as the whole thing is combined, or we can just focus on sections,
So
or.
we're at the end of the section. Do you want to just keep moving forward? All right?
Yeah, let's go move forward.
Do it your
Yeah,
way.
I'm good.
I have just one question too. This is obviously for new construction too, but for existing construction that is out there, someone who has a home decides that they wanted to add to, it would still fit under these guidelines? You know, someone has a home, they've got the room where they want to add, not the accessory structure, but they're saying they want to have this walkway connected, you know, that this will fit into that, and they would still have to go through the same code.
As
same
long as it
building
meets all the
regulations.
requirements,
Very well.
I don't see why it couldn't move forward with a similar thing if it was just raw dirt, new construction versus an existing home. And if they match the material and they do something, just say they do a 15-foot little thing and they do it, and it's all within the primary setbacks, which, believe it or not, sometimes accessory structure, they're easier. You get more room on your lot to do it as accessory. So a lot of people will be like, oh, I just want it as accessory because I might only have a 5-foot setback. Whereas a primary might be a 25-foot setback.
Got it.
So you might not want to do it, or you might want to do it.
It still has to meet building code too. so-
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Good, thank you.
So let's move on to the next section. And this is where, kind of the section, that first one was just kind of a little bit of a introduction to some architecture and some massing, some things that the county and staff and we've been trying to get our hands on for a while. This here is going back to kind of what Rob was saying, is that the county used to have on one lot where you could have the primary, an accessory dwelling unit, and a guest house. And then the guest house was pulled from the code, so now currently you can have a primary and one accessory dwelling unit. So what this is looking to achieve is that if you look under C, which used to be the density, where it read, one maximum of one accessory dwelling unit shall be permitted on a single-family residential lot, that's being stricken. And now it's basically reading that you can have it as follows. That you can have one, just as we are always allowed to, up to 3 acres. If you have more than 3 acres, you are now permitted to have 2. But it also states that in no instance just beneath that, so then we have that where you've got, that's kind of going back to that, question about primaries, accessories, and the relationships, and their square footage and their sizes, so it all balances out. The area of the unit in D speaks to the combined square footage of those 2 ADUs and its relationship to the primary structure, that they cannot exceed it. So if you had a 2,000 square foot house, and you can have 2 ADUs, you can have 2 1,000 foot ADUs. Or just shy of one. So that's kind of what that section is reintroducing. So really what we're reintroducing is reintroducing the allowability of what would have been the carriage house, but instead of having 2 moving parts, we're just bringing back an ADU, and we're just having it as an acreage requirement. Which I don't believe there was an acreage requirement before, it was just,
No.
right, so we believe it's being more responsible by having that acreage requirement in there.
So let me ask a question. People, I know in one island community, they build guest houses sometimes before they build the primary house as a means of, just temporizing the relocation and setting up that way. That would be an accessory dwelling under the old code, but under the new code, if they were within 30 feet of the main structure, it could be part of the main structure, correct? In other words, they've already built the guest house. Now they wanted to make it part of the main structure.
As long as it was built under the primary setbacks, which it probably was if it was
Okay.
built first. That they could go back and combine it and meet this, connect it, match it, and it would just be part of the primary. And that, if they had more room, then they could go build an ADU somewhere else on the lot.
Okay,
But again, this is all for, this is large lot stuff.
yep.
This is rural, large lot type of things we're talking about here. Okay, so does anybody have any questions in kind of C right there about just the idea of 3 acres, you're allowed 1, if you have more than 3 acres, now you get 2. We think that's pretty clear.
My question is, does this, it doesn't seem to discount or change any of the regulations under family compounds?
No.
No.
This has nothing to do with it.
Because family compounds really tend to be smaller houses or smaller mobile
Yeah.
homes or, you know.
This is
that's-
completely separate of that.
So, but it doesn't create any conflict with that. I mean, this seems very clear to me.
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
Okay.
No.
Great.
So then in the standpoint of D1, so here what you have there is that there's really, and Rob, I might have Rob jump in on this one a little bit, is that when it comes to the previous language, is recalled back, is that you had a size limitation of 1,000 square feet. So now what it's doing is within the T2 and all conventional zones where you had the 1,000, it's saying, or shall be a carriage house building type, and it references the carriage house type, which is kind of the form code. It's got architectural requirements. It's more driven by a footprint and less by a square footage. So that's the difference there. So you can go off of a number or you can go off a style. Just a little bit more flexibility for people. That's all it's providing. We're not taking anything from anybody. We're just providing some more options. And then in all the transect zones, carriage house, see that was already there. So we just took what was in 2 about the carriage house and just added it into 1 to provide there an opportunity. The size of that based off of the footprint, if you had a 1 and 2 story, if allowed, you could get it larger than 1,000 square feet. So that's part of it. So you could do the 1,000 or you could go with that style and get a little bit larger of a unit. But you're still going to be regulated. I would say go back to area of unit where we talked about its relationship to the primary. So you're at some point in time, you're going to hit the ceiling. So it just provides some opportunity of the carriage house type in that area. That's all it is doing. It's something that's already in the code. We just put it in that section as well. And then under H rental, it's just that language is in there. Accessory dwelling, it should not be leased or rented for tenants less than 30 consecutive days. That was kind of in there pre-short-term rental. As you all know, we adopted short-term rentals. So what we have done now is we have added unless approved following the process for short-term rentals, just to make that very clear in that section of the code. So that's kind of what 4.230 for the accessory dwelling units is in there. Is there any questions in that?
My question always on H, and we've had this discussion before, is, enforcement and codes people. I mean,
It's always gonna be a
nothing that you
problem.
can do. It's always going to be a problem. I
We
mean,
can
my
write all the
neighborhood is-
laws and rules in the world. That doesn't mean you're gonna go out there and drop the speed limit,
Right.
right? So,
This is a growing issue, though, short-term rentals.
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Big issue. Trying to control it.
Because when we have laws, at least we have some type of enforcement mechanism. That does not mean people are going to follow them.
Short-term rental, STRP, what's the P?
Property?
Short-term rental property.
Okay.
That means it's short-term rental property, STRP. Just add the word property. And H.
Unless approved as a short-term rental,
Unless
short-term
approved
rental
as a
property.
short-term rental property.
Oh, you talk about as
STRP.
are the P. Yeah, all right. That, well, make a recommendation for that.
And I'd say in I, in my neighborhood, I can immediately point out 5 where there are recreational vehicles and travel trailers around someone's house, and they are used as accessories. So I guess I call codes enforcement.
Yeah, I mean, they're out there all the time.
Yep.
Full-time job. County needs twice as many as we got.
That's what I think.
Okay, so is there any, I just want to, I know this, we good on this, or do we want to move on?
This makes sense.
I think we're ready
I
to
think,
move on.
yeah,
Yeah.
And then this one's super easy. That was really,
Yeah.
here, this is where we had, and this kind of goes back to where Rob was saying when you had the guest house and all that, really, it kind of read, legally permitted that and that even when they are located on the same property regarding whether it be a principal or the ADU. So technically, what this is doing now is being that we're allowing additional ADUs to be entered, we're allowed to be permitted on property, we're putting in here that you can't, it's not just unlimited ADUs on property. You can have them, you can go through the process, but it's gotta be either or. That's what that is achieving.
Yeah, and I would add to this that accessory dwelling units are often, they're kind of couched as a type of affordable housing, because it's introducing an apartment in, which are often single-family neighborhoods. And the minute you start converting those ADUs into short-term rentals, you're completely, if anything, you're only adding to
To the problem.
the problem
Right.
of
The shortage of
affordable
housing.
housing. So this, I think this kind of, it limits it to one, so it means if you did have a single-family house and you created an accessory dwelling unit, then in a way that becomes a source of income for the person who lives in the property versus, something kind of done speculatively
Right.
to allow as many short-term rentals.
Yeah, I mean, this is, at the same time, we're trying to provide some flexibilities, we're adding in more use of land, but we're saying, but if you're gonna do this, be responsible. We're looking at affordable housing, we're looking at more of the use of land, and that's kind of where all of these kind of work together to kind of provide some opportunity, but limitations, and address opportunities for possible affordable housing in certain areas of the county.
Questions?
Do you feel that this, particularly general standards, lines up well, and would you call, with municipal ordinances about the STRPs and accessory buildings? I know the lot size is, really dramatically different, but is there a way, would the county be perceived as being more flexible than municipalities in their, in this new language? Or less, or it's apples and oranges?
It's hard to speak, because I think, like, going back to the short-term rentals have so many different things, like where there are caps, how there's uses, different things, but for the purposes of the county's purpose, I can tell you this is the right thing to do
Yeah.
in regards to if you agree with the other two things.
Got it.
That's the answer to the question.
Yeah.
That's good enough, yeah.
One of the things we always wrestle with is the differences between how the municipalities do things in the code versus the county does them. And I think we're always looking for ways to blend so that people don't get confused of, when I live in the county, I live in the municipality, I can do it here, I can't do it here. And you get into all those arguments. So I think, I guess I'm going to ask, did you do a review of what the municipalities are doing in Beaufort County as it regards to these particular standards?
For short-term rentals?
Well, for the whole thing,
Well, I'm gonna push back a little bit on this
Okay.
whole municipality and county stuff. They're two different business models.
That's correct.
We're not in the municipal business, we're in the county business, we're in the unincorporated county business. Our code shouldn't be a municipal code. Otherwise, we'd be developing like municipality. We need to provide areas of where we have transects near them. We need to encourage municipalities to annex when it's appropriate. I wish, of course, we had state laws that require them to follow our county comprehensive plan. That's a state issue. If you guys have an hour, I've talked about that, but let's not do that tonight. But in regards to us comparing ourselves to municipalities on every issue, I don't think that's good planning. I think it's appropriate sometimes, but not when we're dealing with things that are oftentimes related to what we've been talking about, are typically larger lot style type stuff. Because municipalities are, there could be but they're usually smaller lots, more dense, more urban style development. Beaufort County has a Transect code, which is the best thing that you could do to align yourself closer to municipality. Most counties don't have that. Most counties say, we're in this game, if you want urban densities, go talk to the local municipality and have them serve you.
I'll add to that. You mentioned apples and oranges, and I think that's also the case, because the city of Beaufort and town of Port Royal regulate short-term rentals very differently. And then Hilton Head is an entirely different type of community as well. I mean, they're, a resort community. So, and this is really building off our existing policies
Yeah.
that we adopted several years ago. This is just
Yeah.
kind of closing a loophole for what this might open up in terms of introducing an additional accessory dwelling unit.
This was just a staff looking at this going, it does what now? And now we're adding another one. Well, let's just fix that now. So that's all this is doing.
All right. Are there any final questions anybody has? Can I ask for a motion on the proposed revisions?
I move that we accept the proposal of these text amendments with the one single amendment to the adding of a word.
Property?
Yes.
Or you could either put the word property in, or you could do like you did on 4.1.360, you just say STRP and don't say short-term rental. It's, be consistent with the
We'll
rest
just
of
add the word
word.
property.
Either way works. So,
Okay, did we state that appropriately in terms of, well,
Is the motion okay as
Well, first, I would recommend using the word, don't say the word accept. I would recommend an approval
yeah.
sorry.
with,
So recommend approval, you can read the subject line if you want to, with the amendment.
I move we accept the text amendment to the Community Development Code as stated in Section 7.
I'm not,
Well,
can you,
why don't you do it?
I can't.
It would just be recommend for approval, wouldn't it?
Yeah. All we're looking for is a recommend, if that's what you all want to do, we're just looking for a recommendation for approval
kind of
with the
what I'm
addition of the
poking around
word
here.
property.
Go ahead, do it, we'll let you do it one more time. Recommend for approval. Go ahead.
What am I approving?
Yeah, I'll
What are we
just
approving?
clarify,
Recommending for
the planning commission makes recommendations to county council,
Oh,
and I think
yeah.
that's,
Okay.
that's why we're kind of,
parsing words.
You're making
Yeah.
a recommendation, yeah.
Want me to do it? I'll do it.
Yeah, why don't you? I'm
make
getting
a
a
motion
brain
that
freeze
we-
here.
Recommend for approval the text amendments to sections 4.2.20.E, standards for freestanding accessory buildings and structures. Section 4.2.30, accessory/secondary dwelling unit, with the amendments to section H of the wording, and section 4.1.360.C, general standards. Is that good?
That's perfect.
Sounds great.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Do we have a second?
Well, let's just see if we get a second.
Do we have a second? We have a second. All those in favor of the motion, raise your hand. No. Okay, it's unanimous. Move forward. Thank you. By the way, your explanation
Yes, well
was
done.
was
Well done.
perfect. Was
It was just
very-
what we needed.
Very well done.
Thanks.
Very well done. Thank
And I
you.
appreciate the vision you guys had on this too, instead of
Yeah.
closing the barn door after the horses.
All right.
Yeah, because,
Yeah.
before I pass it.
All right, we're not, I understand, not going to be doing a one-year review on the comprehensive plan, but it's going to be coming attractions for the next month.
yes, and I'll watch the video on procrastination as well.
In Rob's defense, he's been extremely busy.
We know that, we know that. All right, I have nothing further to report. Is there any other business you would like to discuss? If not,
Move for adjournment.
I'd be The meeting is adjourned.